Have you ever looked at Japan and wondered why people there seem to live longer and stay so calm? A lot of people chalk it up to genetics or discipline. But the real difference often comes from actions so small you barely notice them. If you like content that breaks down the why behind behavior, hit like and subscribe because in just a few minutes you'll see how the things we dismiss as too small to matter can quietly reroute an entire life. The key comes down to something incredibly simple. You're not failing because you're lazy. You're failing because the habits you pick are too big. They demand willpower every day. They feel like pressure, and your brain pushes back against anything that drains energy. The harder you try, the more exhausted you get, and eventually you decide something must be wrong with you. But a sustainable system is built on the lowest friction behaviors, the ones you can repeat without a fight. And that's exactly where most people go in the opposite direction. Habit lists are easy to turn into a checklist to conquer. Instead, think of these like knobs on a control panel, turn them slightly, and the pressure in your life changes. You don't need to do all 8, you just need to see the common thread that makes them work. Once you see the pattern, you can create new habits on your own. And the pattern is this in Japan. They often make things smaller than what feels significant. The shared principle is reducing friction to increase repetition. Your brain doesn't love breakthroughs. It loves what's predictable. The smaller the behavior, the less you argue with yourself. Repeat it long enough, and it becomes default. The results compound like interest, slow, but relentless. The truth is, what carries you forward isn't motivation. It's a behavior that's too easy to quit, so you keep doing it. Habit 1. Kaizen starts with something so small it almost feels silly. Working out 1 push-up, reading 1 page. The goal is to start without needing momentum. Even doing the minimum still counts as a win because you kept the return chain alive. If the chain stays alive, tomorrow still has a door. And when the door is always open, you're less afraid of failing, so you keep going. But why is minimum so powerful? Tiny actions give you an immediate reward, the feeling of I can begin. That's an identity reward. And when that identity repeats, your brain automates the behavior to save energy, so you rely less on willpower. You think you're building muscles or knowledge. What you're really building is the reflex of I can do this. While you're chasing big results, your brain is convinced by small wins. The trap with Kaizen is turning 1% into an excuse to push harder. You overdo it for a few days, break the rhythm, and lose the main benefit, the chain. Kaizen doesn't ask how much you did. It asks whether you came back. If a habit requires tension just to maintain it, it's the wrong size. Shrink it until it needs no preparation. After 1 week, the first thing that changes is your trust in your rhythm. Habit 2. Ikigai. Ikigai isn't always a grand mission. In Okinawa, it might be tending a garden, teaching a grandchild, or making something with your hands. The shared point is that you have a reason to wake up that doesn't require anyone to grade you. When you wake up with one meaningful thing to do, you naturally protect your sleep, your meals, and your body. Meaning, it turns out, is a switch for endurance. The Ikigai framework asks 4 questions. What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need from you? And how can you be paid? You don't need perfect answers. Writing them down already pulls you out of drifting on someone else's schedule. When your meaning has a name, decisions feel less foggy, and your mental energy leaks less. But the hardest question is usually this: are you willing to prioritize it? The trap with Ikigai is self-conviction. If I haven't found it, I'm failing. Ikigai shifts with seasons of life. Trying to freeze it creates pressure to choose correctly. Instead of hunting for a huge answer, ask a smaller one: what makes me feel 1% more alive today? Small questions open the door to big answers. The more you demand certainty before you move, the more life works. In reverse, you move first, and clarity follows. Habit 3. Harahachibu means stopping at 80% full. You pause so your body can catch up with your behavior, because the feeling of enough often arrives late. If you eat until you feel completely full, you've already gone too far, and it doesn't mean you're weak. The simplest move is this: halfway through your meal, pause for 10 seconds and ask, am I still truly hungry? You'll see the effect after a few meals, not instantly. Eating slowly doesn't just reduce quantity, it brings you back into your body. Putting your chopsticks down means you've stepped out of autopilot, and autopilot is what makes you overeat. A lot of people keep eating because they hate wasting food, because they already served it, because they feel awkward leaving anything behind. But your plate doesn't know what your body needs. Only a pause can tell you that. And pausing is a skill. The more you practice it, the clearer your signals become. The trap of 80% is turning a meal into a strict rule, so you eat in your head instead of your body. Stress makes you swallow faster. Guilt makes you deaf to fullness. Harahachi bo isn't a ban, it's a check-in. Pause. If you're still hungry, keep eating but slower. The goal is to sync sensation with behavior, and strangely, when you listen to your body better, you often start hearing your emotions more clearly too. Habit 4. Shinrin Yoku. Shinrin Yoku is walking slowly in nature, no goal, no earbuds. Your eyes rest on softer shapes, your ears take in steady sound, and your body receives signals of safety. When safety signals rise, cortisol drops, and your heart rate settles, and you shift into recovery. You think rest means doing nothing, but your nervous system often rests best when it switches to a different kind of stimulation, and nature is stimulation that doesn't trigger defense. The key is not optimizing, no step counts, no KPIs. Don't turn it into a workout. When there's no goal, your brain stops scoring you, and that state opens the door to recovery. Try 12 minutes with no devices, then notice how you feel a few hours later, less irritable. Less mental noise. You often notice it in the exact moment you're about to snap, and then you don't. The trap is bringing competition into nature, walking fast, timing yourself, showing off progress. At that point, you've just changed scenery while keeping the same pressure. The correct version is even smaller. Pick one sense. Focus for 3 minutes, then switch. You don't need more nature. You need less noise. And you can create less noise surprisingly fast even in the middle of a busy day. Habit 5. Wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is seeing beauty in imperfection. Something with marks is something that has lived. When you demand that everything be correct, you're demanding the world stop moving so you stay tired. Wabi-sabi doesn't tell you to give up, it tells you to change how you see what's missing. A crack can be history, not a defect. But why does a shift in perspective feel so relieving? Your brain compares to predict. When your environment is full of edited, curated versions of life, your brain raises the standard and not enough becomes the default emotion. Wabi-sabi brings the standard back toward reality, so the pressure drops. You practice one skill, changing the meaning you assign. Broken creates shame. Used creates calm. Most emotions come from the label you choose, and labels can change. The trap is using wabi-sabi as permission to be careless. It doesn't glorify carelessness. It lets you improve without humiliating yourself first. You still fix things, still learn, but you don't beat yourself up as the price of effort. Try this. Pick one mistake you made recently. Write one sentence, "I'm experimenting," then make one tiny adjustment. After a few repetitions, a paradox shows up. When you fear mistakes less, you actually move faster. Habit 6. Gaman is enduring with dignity. You keep going when it's hard, but you don't turn hardship into your identity. You still admit you're tired, you just don't turn it into a stage where your brain tells a helpless story. Constant complaining trains you into the role of a victim, and that role consumes more energy than the problem itself. Gaman means standing next to your feelings without letting them drive, so you still have strength for the next step. When you narrate difficulty as "I can't handle this," your nervous system stays activated longer. A description like "this is hard, and I'm working through it" signals within range, helping you recover faster. Gammon doesn't forbid support. It reminds you that strength doesn't need an audience. The line between endurance and self-harm is thin. The trap is using gammon to ignore real needs: no sleep, no rest, no asking for help until you collapse. True gammon goes with cutting the unnecessary and getting support at the right time. Here's a small move when you feel the urge to complain. State one plain fact, then ask, "What is the smallest step I can take right now?" That question turns emotion into action. Act first, and the feeling often softens after. Habit 7. Omoyari. Omoyari is considering others before they have to ask. Speaking softly, cleaning up what you use, leaving a little space. These are ways of reducing social friction. When friction is low, your brain feels less defensive, and relationships move more smoothly. You don't need to live in Japan to try it. Test it in hallways, elevators, at work. After a few days, you'll notice people cooperate more. The mechanism is cognitive load. When you constantly have to brace for noise, crowding, or inconsiderate behavior, your brain has to scan nonstop. Omoyari makes the environment more predictable, so the collective nervous system drops its guard. Kindness becomes a kind of design. You set a small standard, others feel the comfort, and they mirror it. Once the loop forms, you benefit even when you're not trying. The trap is turning Omoyari into self-sacrifice for approval. Helping to be praised turns you into a people-pleasing machine, then you get exhausted and resentful. True omoyari doesn't demand repayment. It simply avoids making the atmosphere heavier. The easiest start is asking, if I were the person behind me, what would I want? The answer is usually tiny. But strangely, that tiny thing is what makes people remember you. Habit 8. Kintsugi. Kintsugi is repairing broken pottery with gold instead of hiding the cracks. In life, you will break, you'll fail, you'll have messy chapters. If you treat cracks as proof that you're damaged, you live in defense hide, avoid, pretend. But healing needs truth. Kintsugi does the opposite. It gives the crack a place, then repairs it piece by piece so you still have agency in your own life. A small repair sends a powerful signal: I can still affect this. That signal pulls you out of helplessness. Repair isn't a grand vow. It's a specific act: scheduling the appointment, apologizing, telling the truth. When the action happens, your brain updates its prediction. The future isn't locked. And when prediction changes, the next step becomes easier. After a few weeks, the crack is still there, but it no longer controls you. The trap is romanticizing pain, turning suffering into a badge, then never healing. Cracks only become gold when you actually repair them. Repair doesn't have to be big. It has to be consistent. Choose the smallest crack you can face. Then ask, what's the smallest repair I can make? When the question is small enough, the answer often arrives quickly, and the moment you begin repairing, the storyline of your life shifts. When you look back at all 8 habits, you'll notice they all reduce friction in different areas: starting, deciding, eating, regulating your nervous system, comparing, handling emotions, social life, and recovery. None of them ask you to explode into change. They ask you to repeat. When friction is low enough, you don't need to push. You just need to show up on rhythm. But one habit that's too big is enough to raise the friction again. You can cram all 8 into 1 week and fall into the same cycle: excitement, pressure, fatigue, quitting. Or you can choose one knob and turn it slightly every day. One approach turns life into a project. The other turns life into a system that needs calibration. The difference sounds small, but it decides your inner experience: tension to prove yourself, or consistency to build yourself. You may simply be using the wrong size. You don't need to become Japanese to benefit. What matters is the size of the behavior and the rhythm of repetition. Doing something small the right way changes how your brain predicts tomorrow, and when prediction changes, behavior follows. Self-blame rarely helps. It only raises friction. If you're stuck, ask, where am I making this too big? A few days later, you'll feel the difference. Pick the easiest habit, not the coolest one. 30 seconds of kaizen, 10 seconds of pausing mid-meal, 12 minutes walking with no earbuds, 1 omoyari question before you act. Just one thing, once a day. What you're watching for is the feeling: I can come back. Confidence comes from evidence, repeated proof that you can hold a rhythm, and that evidence accumulates fast. Keeping a tiny habit quietly is you building a strength that only you can feel. In the next video, I'll talk about a paradox that often kills habits. Sometimes the reward you give yourself for doing it right is the very thing that breaks it. If you want to keep going, subscribe, because that paradox can flip the way you reward yourself faster than you'd expect.